Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about gateway games. So we got a pile of a dozen here, and we're not going to talk about them in any kind of real order. This is just 12 games. We think all of these are terrific as new games for new gamers. And so if you don't know what a gateway game is, really it's what it sounds like. It opens up those gates, it gets you into the hobby. It's your first hit to really get you hooked on that sweet board gaming.
There are three things that we consider make really good gateway games. And one of them is that the game is easy to learn. That's pretty crucial. You don't want to be spending hours and hours learning a game. Another one is that it looks good. That really helps get people drawn in and wanting to play it. And then the third one is that it's replayable. If you don't have a large board game collection and you're starting out with just a few of them, you want to make sure that you can play them again and again and again.
That is really our thinking behind all of these games, that you learn it quick, play it over and over again, and you're not going to be embarrassed to show it to your friends. So let's kick it off with the first one that is especially pretty.
First game is Azul, and it's a set collecting tile placing game, and it looks amazing. You are getting these tiles and you're filling up your rows, and as you fill them you get to take them off, and you're making patterns, and you score for having completed rows and different types of patterns. But there's something that is just really attractive about the different patterns and the weight of the tiles and the look of it all. It looks a little classy.
Yeah, it really does. Because those tiles that are like Bakelite or whatever, they're nice and like clanky in the bag, and they just feel really good. And the gameplay, super simple, but it does have a little bit of kind of head-to-head, because there's this bit in it where you're tile drafting, and as you draft them, you'll quickly learn that there's really an art to that, because both you're getting the ones you want and you're kind of shafting the other players and kind of sticking it to them.
Yeah, and a lot of new gamers really like that interaction and finding those moments of being able to put one over the other player. And that is Azul.
The next one we're going to talk about is Cascadia. And Cascadia is just super beautiful. You're building out it's based in the Pacific Northwest. And so you're building kind of the Pacific Northwest with these different tiles. But at each turn, you're drafting both a tile and an animal. And you got to put the animals on the tiles they're allowed to go on, while also matching the patterns on the 5 scoring cards, because each one of the cards has a different animal and a different way of scoring that animal. And they're all fairly simple, but for a brand new gamer, it will take probably a little bit of kind of teaching them. But I feel like for anyone really, it makes a lot of sense, which is a great thing when you're talking about a gateway game.
Yeah, I think that is a key thing, is you want people to feel a sense of success when playing. Mm-hmm. And for a game that you are seeing it build out, you go from nothing to having this landscape that even if you didn't quite get all of it perfectly, you still are able to look down and feel like, yeah, I managed to get this big terrain over here and these animals over here. There is still that reward of having achieved something.
Yeah, I think people really like to see the thing that they made at the end of the game. Like, oh, I did that. That was cool. Let's do that again. And this does that well. So.
Next up is Pandemic Iberia, and this fits within the Pandemic series of games, but I'm going with Iberia specifically because it looks really nice. But like most pandemics, you have a role, and so do all of your teammates, and it all is within the medical profession. So you might be a doctor or a researcher or helping out in other ways, in this way building the railways. And a disease has spread out, which is represented by these little cubes. So you have to work together and use your skill sets to try and eliminate the cubes and cure the diseases. But it has a nice ramping up. There are times when the cubes build up, and then a certain stage it might kind of set off and it spread out to all the surrounding areas. So it's this constant tight battle of managing the next disaster and figuring out your priorities as you work together to combat the virus.
And the other cool thing with this one as well is that it's got different levels of play. So you start out with what would be in base game Pandemic, but then you can build up to actual like historical pandemics, which I know seems a little grim, but there's like Spanish fever, I think is one of them.
Malaria, I think.
Cholera, I think. So you can have love in the time of. But there are these 4 different ones, so you're learning a little bit at the same time as well. But if pandemic isn't for you, because you're a little close to home right now, a different co-op one that we would also suggest is Horrified. And Horrified has that same kind of co-op-y feel. You've all got your own roles. But instead of dealing with diseases, you are dealing with monsters. And in this one, specifically universal monsters, there's another one that's kind of like the folklore-y, it's called American Monsters. And it's a lot of the ones you would see on like the first 2 seasons of X-Files. Actually, there's like a Mothman and stuff. But we prefer this one just because I'm a huge fan. We both are of the Universal monster movies. And you're going around this town and you're trying to save the civilians from getting eaten, more or less. And you got to defeat the bad guys at the same time.
Yeah, this one has a little bit more fun and a little bit more silliness. I like that you can be attacked by a monster yourself and you're just put in the hospital. Mm-hmm. So you come back, but it can only happen so many times before you lose the game. But similarly to Pandemic, you have your different roles. Each game feels different because of those different roles. And then the extra bit of it feeling different depending on which monsters that you're playing with.
And again, you can ramp up the difficulty as well because you can play against just 2 if you want like a nice easy beginner game. As you build up, not even easy. It can be hard depending on the monsters. And then you can build up to 3, and then the expert mode is 4, and we've only beat 4 once, and it was like, you got to play exactly right. And we've tried it, I don't know, a dozen times. We won once. So this can certainly be quite a difficult challenge, or it can be a nice, just easy, fun with friends game as well. But that's 2 great co-op games.
Next up is Trails of Tucana, which is a map-making game, and you draw your map based on the territories that are shown on cards. So each turn, 2 different cards get flipped, and it might show a mountain space and a forest space, and then you have to draw a line between them. And then as you go, you're connecting your various lines to connect the outer edges of your island, as well as various things that you're finding along the way to score points. But one of the things that works so nicely about it is everybody is drawing their lines at the same time. And so without having that downtime, it just flows really quickly.
Yeah, it does. And it's fun because you're kind of racing. But it's just instinctively fun to make a map. I feel like everyone just likes making maps.
And a nice thing about it is it's double-sided. So often you'll maybe start on the small island, but then you can do the larger island on the other side right afterwards. And that's Trails of Tucana.
Next up is The Crew. And if you have played any sort of card games, this is not going to be terribly difficult. Basically, this is a trick-taking game, which just means whoever's got the highest cards gets the cards. And this is a cooperative trick-taking game, which is a lot of fun. So each round, you've got these little cards that give you different goals. And the goals will be things like make sure that you win with these specific cards. And then you've got to all work together to make those happen, but without talking. There's almost no communication. So it is a really easy to understand game, but you will play this over and over and over. Within it, it's got kind of a little story. And once you're done that as well, or before you're done that, you can also just play it however you want and just set those missions to whatever you feel like. And I don't know, how many times have we played this?
We've played Mission Deep Sea probably about 30 or so times because we're about halfway through the missions, but a lot of them you'll have to play more than once. And so lots of replayability because you're playing through, if you play through all the missions, and you'll have to play through them multiple times. And then like you said, even when you're done, especially with Mission Deep Sea, you can just choose a difficulty level and then play at that level.
Yeah, this is the second game as well because the first one was Search for Planet 9. And that one's good too, but this simplifies it a little bit, streamlines it a little bit, and I think probably has more replayability over time, which is saying a lot because I think we played Search for Planet 9 like 60 times. So we've put a lot of hours into this, and I would strongly suggest it.
Next up is Wingspan, and Wingspan wouldn't have been one I would have originally considered to be a gateway game just because it has a bit of a higher complexity than some of the other games that we have on this list. But there has been lots of articles written about it. It's sold millions of copies. So proof is in the pudding that it has brought a lot of new gamers into gaming. And I think part of that is the theme. It has a beautiful nature theme. It looks really, really lovely. And I really focused on trying to bring new gamers in by having lots of tutorials. So it has all the books include kind of taking you through your first few turns to really walk you through the steps. So even if it is a bit more complex than other games you've played, you can really get a handle on it quite quickly.
Yeah, you get eased into it little by little. And really what you're doing in this game is you've got birds, you got bird cards, you're putting those birds into different areas. And then you're doing stuff with those birds. So each of those areas also does a different action. The forest gives you food. The middle one lays eggs. The bottom one gets you more cards. You don't need to understand all of this, but you will find that it becomes intuitive and it becomes instinctive, and it's one that it comes with so many. There's like hundreds of cards just in the base, and then 3 more expansions that you can get as well for it, and more on the way too. They're doing every continent, so very expandable, very replayable.
Yeah, I was gonna say the replayability, just because of the deck of the bird cards in the original, is really hefty. That every game is gonna look so different because there's no way that you're gonna have exactly the same birds as in any other game. And they make it also, the nice thing about Stonemaier games is it's playable of minimum 1 to 5. So for any gamers that want a fun solo challenge, this opens that up as well. And playing up to 5, and with some of the new expansions, even more, is great for a larger gaming group too.
And the bird feeder is just such a selling point. You'll see that bird feeder dice tower that you put the dice in. It's not necessary, but also it is so necessary. And that's going to sell the game to everyone that you play it with.
Yeah, dropping those dice in that bird feeder is fantastic.
Next up, we're going to talk about Carcassonne. And Carcassonne has been bringing people into games for decades now. I'm not sure how old it is, but it's old enough that this is the game that brought me into games, so I know it works as a gateway game. It just builds this beautiful map. You're building a map. Every turn, you're putting out a tile, and it's making more of a map. And you're connecting up castles, you're connecting up roads, you're building fields, and then you're just putting your little dudes onto those parts of the map. Once those things fill up and close off, you score some points. That's all there is to it. But within that, there are so many fun little decisions, and surprisingly, kind of mean decisions too.
I think there comes a point when people are playing when they realize the possibilities of really getting in each other's way. And at first it's kind of like, all right, you're over here doing this and I'm over here doing that. And then as soon as someone starts putting in a tile, that means, wait a minute, by putting a person there, you're going to try and take my city, aren't you? And this moment switches, and some people love that about it, of it being able to be interactive, and then it becomes this race and this bit of a competition of building up who can maintain control of all the various areas.
Yeah, it is interesting how it rides that line, because everyone's building this same map and you're all building it out, so it makes this kind of, oh, we're all doing this, but you're really in it for yourself at the same time. So it's really cool, that balance between the two.
Next up is Camel Up, which right out of the gate looks great. It has this amazing 3D board that pops up with the palm trees and a pyramid in the middle, and it is a betting game. And you are betting on this camel race, but it's not just any camel race. Anything can happen. You never know how far they're going to go. And there are 2 layers to it. You bet on who's going to win who's going to be most ahead at the end of the current round, but also you're trying to kind of hedge your bets for who's going to win the race overall. I particularly recommend the second version, this one here, because it has the backwards camels. So there are some camels that are running the whole other direction, and if any camel lands on them, they get taken along for the ride. So it can be any camel's race for who wins.
Yeah, and that was the important thing, is if any camel lands on them. Because in this camel race, anytime a camel is on the same spot as another camel, it stands on its back. And they can pile right up, which means that now if any of the camels under them run, they're getting like a free ride for a few spaces. So when you're betting, you're thinking about, has this one come out yet? Is this dice out yet? Is this color of camel out yet? as well as where are they in like the current camel tower, and how close are the backwards racing camels to those camels, because all of that stuff is gonna play into it. And then at the same time, you just gotta realize you're gonna be wrong. Something always happens. It's something unpredictable in this camel race, and that just makes it so fun because everyone is always in it, always involved. Next up is Clank, and in Clank, you are a thief, and you got to steal some treasure, and then you got to get out while the getting's good. And in order to do that, you've got a deck of cards, and it's a deck building game. And if you haven't played a deck building game, that really it means what it sounds like. You've got some cards. Each turn, you're going to be buying other cards. You're going to add those to your cards. And then as you shuffle your cards and you play your cards, you're going to have more and more cards, and you're hopefully buying better cards. And those cards are going to do stuff like they're going to move, they're going to buy more cards, and they're going to get rid of Clank. And what Clank is it's the noise that you're making as you're sneaking. So everyone's trying to sneak, and it's kind of like a push your luck race. And so it's kind of a like, how much guts do you have? And also, do you have too much guts?
There really is that balance, because the longer you're in there, it's not only the better treasure, but the higher likelihood that you'll be able to just even buy more stuff or get higher value cards, which is all going to be worth more at the end. So if you're in there longer and you can get back, you have a pretty good chance of having the most. But as soon as somebody gets back, they're going to be pulling out the Clank, which is the danger cubes. And so now that's happening even more frequently. And if you don't make it past a certain distance, you get no points. It's not even that you don't get the bonus for landing. At a certain stage, if you haven't made it past there, you get 0.
Yeah, and the Clank, it's really fun as well, because in each round, someone's reaching into this bag, or most rounds, someone's reaching into this bag and pulling out a number of those cubes, and that number is going to go up. And if it's yours, it gets added to your damage track, and you can only get so many of those, and you are dead, and you get up fast, and you end up with like, you've got one spot left, and you're like, oh, I can get one more point, I can go one more little bit, and you can't, you're gonna die. It happens to me all the time, but because of that push-pull of it just makes it super fun.
Next up is Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is a push your luck game. So you are these old-timey alchemists trying to brew these concoctions. And how it works is the different ingredients are represented by these chips that all go into a bag. And then one by one, you pull the chips out and you lay them out on your cauldron. However, some of those chips are cherry bombs, and if the cherry bombs reach a certain number, then your cauldron explodes, which you don't want to happen. So you really want to try and pull out as many ingredients as you can to fill up your cauldron as much as you can before it explodes. But each round, depending on how far you got, you're able to add new ingredients to the bag, and each the new ingredients have these little powers that happen either when you pull them out or at the end of the round. So it is just this really fun push your luck game, and it can really be anyone's game. I've had it before where all I've pulled for my first chips are cherry bombs, even if I've had like 20 different ingredients in there.
And those different chips that you can buy as well. There's a whole bunch of different sets that you can mix and match, or you can play in their different sets. I think the base game comes with like four different ones, and it plays totally different depending on which ones you're using. And that push your luck it's just naturally fun. There's something fun about that. Like, oh boy, I know I've got one chip in here that will blow me up. I've got 2 chips in here that are going to be great. Am I going to take that risk? Yes, I am. And then of course you blow up. But there's something so fun about that decision. Last one on our list, and this is probably the most famous one, is Ticket to Ride. But weirdly, we don't own a copy, or at least we don't have a copy here. I've got, I think actually a couple back in Canada, but we don't have one here. But regardless of that, this is a terrific game, and we've played it a bunch, and there is no game I've been more successful in bringing gamers into gaming, in new gamers into gaming, than Ticket to Ride. And Ticket to Ride it's a train game. It's a route building train game. And each turn in Ticket to Ride, you are either taking a couple of cards, or you're building a train route, or you're getting a ticket. And that's it. But it is so interesting and so addictive, and I've played it so many times. And there are oodles of versions of this game out there. There are 50, 60, I don't even know. There's so many versions of this game. But if you're a new gamer, you're just looking to get into games, you're looking to buy your first Ticket to Ride, I would just keep it old school, go with either the original one, which is the North America map, nice and simple, or Ticket to Ride Europe, which adds a few little fun wrinkles to it, like these tunnels and these train stations. And it is in Europe, which is where we live, so we like that.
Yeah, the trains that you're putting out, they look great too. There's something really nice about building like your long train routes. And as you play Ticket to Ride, particularly if you're playing with the same group, you can kind of get a sense of what they're going to do. And some people very much telegraph what route they're building, of like, oh, I'll build one here and one here. Now I just need to collect these 3 colors. And so depending on how cutthroat you are, you might think, well, I'm going to build there. I don't need that route at all, but I want to make you go the long way around. And so some folks really love that interaction and being able to play off each other and get in each other's way a little bit.
Yeah, this game quickly turns mean. Well, it can turn mean with the wrong or right group, depending on how mean you want a game to get, because it can totally be your head's down, you're just making your routes, everyone's happily making their routes, or it can totally be that I see where you want to go. And that is it. So that's 12 different choices. There's oodles more out there. So if you're thinking, oh boy, but these people said that, yeah, they're right too. They're almost certainly right as well. There are tons more out there that you can get that'll get you into the hobby depending on what your interests are.
Yeah, feel free to pop in the comments what board games got you into the hobby or board games that you use to get others into the hobby. I'm sure people love all of the different suggestions. But thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you for the next one.